The nurse leaned over my hospital bed, pretending to check my IV line, and whispered 4 words that stopped my heart more effectively than any monitor alarm. "Don't drink your tea." I looked up at her, waiting for the joke to land, but her eyes weren't joking. My daughter, Melissa, was down the hall getting coffee. My son-in-law, Gregory, was in the chair beside me, scrolling his phone, the untouched styrofoam cup steaming on my tray table. I had 30 seconds before he looked up and noticed I wasn't drinking it. 30 seconds to decide whether the woman in scrubs was unstable or whether my own family was. My name is Walter Pruitt. I'm 68 years old, and for 35 years I was a claims investigator for an insurance company, the kind of job that teaches you one lesson above all others. Everybody lies a little, and the ones who lie the most are the ones who smile the widest while they're doing it. I retired 8 years ago with a good pension, a paid-off house in a quiet part of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a habit I never managed to shake. I still read every document twice before I sign it, and I still notice when a story doesn't add up. 3 months before that hospital room, I'd had a mild stroke. Nothing catastrophic. My speech slurred for 2 days, my left hand went weak, and the doctors called it a warning shot. My daughter Melissa flew in from Denver within 48 hours, and I remember being grateful, actually grateful, watching her walk through my front door with her husband Gregory trailing behind her, both of them wearing the concerned faces I'd expect from people who loved me. "They moved into my guest room just for a little while, Dad, until you're steady on your feet again." That was 4 months ago. They never left. I want to be fair here, because fairness was the whole architecture of my career. For the first few weeks, it looked exactly like love. Melissa cooked. Gregory mowed the lawn and fixed the gutter that had been sagging since the spring storms. They drove me to physical therapy twice a week and sat in the waiting room the whole time instead of leaving to run errands. If you'd shown me that version of my house from the outside, I'd have called it the best stroke of luck an old widower could ask for. But investigators notice things, small things. The way Melissa started asking, almost too casually, whether I'd updated my will since Barbara passed my wife. Gone 6 years now, and until Melissa mentioned it, I hadn't touched that document once. The way Gregory, who'd been laid off from his construction management job 11 months earlier and hadn't found steady work since, suddenly seemed to know the exact balance of my retirement accounts down to the dollar, information I never remember volunteering. The way both of them went quiet whenever my neurologist's name came up, and how Gregory once actually flinched, when the doctor mentioned that most stroke patients make a full recovery within 6 months. I told myself I was being paranoid. 35 years of finding fraud in insurance claims will do that to a man. You start seeing patterns in everything, even where there might not be any. But then came the night I couldn't sleep, and I got up for water, and I heard them in the kitchen below my bedroom, their voices pitched low the way people speak when they think a house is asleep. "He's not going to sign anything if he thinks it's for us," Melissa said. "It has to look like it's his idea." "The doctor said another one could happen any time," Gregory answered. "We don't have forever, Mel. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage back home." I stood at the top of the stairs in my socks, my heart doing something it hadn't done since the actual stroke, and I made myself remember one rule from 3.5 decades of reviewing fraudulent claims. Never react to the first piece of evidence. Gather more. A single overheard sentence proves nothing in a courtroom. It only proves something to the person standing on the stairs at midnight, and that person needs to keep his face very, very still. So that's what I did. I went back to bed, and in the morning I was exactly the grateful, slightly foggy father they expected. And I began, very quietly, to run an investigation on my own family. I want you to understand something about the way I was raised in this profession, because it explains everything that follows. When someone hands you a form, you don't just read what's written, you read what's missing. So I started paying attention to what Melissa and Gregory weren't saying, and what documents kept appearing on my kitchen counter with sticky notes reading, "Just need your signature here, Dad," in Melissa's handwriting. The first one was a form authorizing Gregory as a secondary contact on my checking account. "For emergencies," Melissa explained, refilling my coffee before I'd finished reading it. "In case something happens and you're in the hospital again, someone needs access." I signed it. I want to be honest with you, I signed it. Because 35 years of reading people had also taught me the second rule. The one that matters just as much as the first. Sometimes you let the fraud proceed a little further, because a small, contained loss now buys you the evidence to stop a much larger one later. The second document worried me more. A power of attorney form, pre-filled, naming Melissa as my agent for healthcare and financial decisions in the event of incapacity. I asked, as mildly as I could manage, what exactly counted as incapacity. And Gregory answered too fast, the way people do when they've rehearsed something. Just standard language, Walter. Everybody our age has parents doing this now. He wasn't my age. He was 41. I didn't sign that one. I told them my old law firm, the one that had handled Barbara's estate, needed to review anything permanent like that. And I watched something flicker across Melissa's face, not concern for my caution, but irritation at the delay. It lasted less than a second, but I'd spent a career watching claimants' faces in the half second after I asked a question they hadn't prepared for, and I knew exactly what I was looking at. That night I drove myself, alone, telling them I had a follow-up appointment, to a locksmith across town, and had a small fireproof lockbox installed in the crawl space above my garage, accessible only through a panel I'd built myself decades ago when I still did my own home repairs. Into it went copies of my actual will, my actual account statements, and a small digital voice recorder I'd bought at an electronics store with cash. The recorder is what caught the conversation about the hospital. 2 weeks later, my cardiologist adjusted a medication for my blood pressure, a routine change, nothing dramatic, but it meant a 2-night observation stay just to be safe. Melissa insisted on bringing me herbal tea from home each evening, better than the hospital garbage they serve you, she said, and I drank it gratefully the first night, because why wouldn't I? On the second night, she brought the tea again, set it on my tray, and went to get coffee with Gregory, leaving the two of us, me and the untouched cup, alone in the room for exactly the length of time it took a nurse named Carol Jimenez to walk past my door, glance at my chart, glance at the cup, and come back in under the pretense of checking my IV. "Don't drink your tea," she whispered. I looked at her the way I used to look at a claimant whose story had just developed a crack in it. "Why not?" She checked the hallway before answering. "I've been a nurse for 19 years, Mr. Pruitt. I know what benzodiazepine overdose looks like when it walks in the door, and I know what it looks like when a family member is a little too calm about a fall risk. Your daughter asked me twice this week what medications would show up as natural on a tox screen for someone your age with your heart history. I didn't like the way she asked it. I especially didn't like that she smiled when I answered. I sat there in that hospital bed with my heart pounding harder than it had at the top of my own staircase, and I asked her the only question that mattered. Are you certain? Because if you're wrong, you're accusing my daughter of trying to kill me. I'm not certain of anything, except what I heard and what I've seen in 19 years, Carol said. But I am certain enough that I poured that tea into a specimen cup, instead of down the drain, and it's sitting in a locked drawer at the nurse's station right now. You can do whatever you want with that information. I just couldn't watch you drink it and say nothing. My own father died in a facility that ignored every warning sign a nurse gave them because families are supposed to be trusted, and nobody wanted the paperwork of being wrong about that. I've carried that for 6 years. I won't carry another one. I asked her to keep the sample exactly where it was, untouched, and I asked her not to say a single word to Melissa or Gregory. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old supervisor from the insurance company, a woman named Denise Okafor who'd since become a private investigator, and I asked her to come to the hospital, quietly, off the books, as a friend, visiting a sick colleague. Denise arrived within 2 hours, and I told her everything, the midnight conversation, the power of attorney, the tea. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't tell me I was imagining things. She just opened a legal pad and started writing, the way we used to when a claim smelled wrong. First thing, she said, we get that sample properly tested through a lab with a documented chain of custody, not just left in a drawer. Second thing, you go home tomorrow and you act exactly like nothing happened. You're groggy, you're grateful, you're the same trusting father you've always been. Nothing changes on the surface. Everything changes underneath. The lab results came back 9 days later. The tea contained a crushed, dissolved dose of my late wife's old sleeping medication pills that should have been disposed of years ago, pills I certainly hadn't kept in the house, which meant someone had gone looking for them, or bought something similar, specifically to combine with the blood thinner my new cardiologist had just prescribed. Denise's contact at the lab put it plainly. At my age, with my heart history, that combination stood a real chance of causing a bleed, serious enough to look, on paper, like an unfortunate but entirely natural complication of stroke recovery. No autopsy would have raised a single question. It would have been filed, mourned, and closed within a week. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage after Denise told me that, and for the first time since Barbara died, I cried until my chest hurt. Then I wiped my face, and I went home, and I let Melissa hug me at the door and tell me how relieved she was that I was okay, and I hugged her back, and some part of me that will never fully heal noted, the way I used to note discrepancies in a claim file, that her relief felt performed, rehearsed. A data point that didn't belong in the file of a daughter who loved her father. What followed was the hardest month of my life, harder than losing Barbara, because grief is at least honest about what it takes from you. This was different. This required me to sit across the dinner table from my own daughter every night, to let Gregory refill my water glass with hands I now knew had likely handled a crushed sedative, and to smile, and to ask about their week, and to be, convincingly, the fading old man they believed they were managing toward an inheritance. I let Melissa help me update my will, sitting beside me at my own kitchen table while a new document took shape, one that, unbeknownst to her, was not the real one. The real will, the one leaving my estate to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying accounting and finance, the field I'd built my whole career in, was already executed, witnessed, and locked in a safe deposit box under Denise's supervision, along with sworn statements, time-stamped photographs of the power of attorney document, and a full written account of the midnight conversation. The version on my kitchen table, the one Melissa hovered over with her pen ready, existed only to keep her calm, to keep her digging her own hole a little deeper, confident that the ground beneath her was solid. I let Gregory help me set up new online banking credentials, watching through a small camera I'd had installed in the bookshelf across from my desk, legally purchased, clearly disclosed to no one, aimed at a room in my own home, which my lawyer assured me was perfectly permissible in Oklahoma, as long as there was no audio in bedrooms or bathrooms. There was audio everywhere else. I made sure of that. It paid off on a rainy Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the hospital. I was supposedly asleep upstairs. The recorder in my study, disguised inside an old cassette player Barbara used to keep her recipes on, picked up every word. "He's slower this week," Gregory said. "Did you see him forget where he put his keys twice yesterday?" "He's always been like that," Melissa answered, and something in her voice had gone flat, clinical, a register I'd never heard from my own daughter in 68 years of knowing her. "We can't wait for another natural opening. The tea didn't work. We need the incompetency angle now. If we get him declared unfit, we don't need to wait for anything to happen. We just need Dr. Voss to sign off. And Dr. Voss owes us. And if he fights it, he won't even know to fight it, Greg. That's the whole point. We tell him it's for his safety. We tell him it's temporary. Old men trust their daughters. That's the one thing you can always count on." I sat at the top of my own staircase again, in my socks again, and this time I didn't feel my heart pound with fear. I felt something colder settle into place, something with the calm, procedural clarity of a completed claims file. I thought about all the fraudulent claims I'd caught over 35 years, all the people who believed, right up until the moment the evidence landed on a judge's desk, that they were the ones in control of the story. I thought about Carol Jimenez risking her nursing license to hand a stranger a specimen cup. I thought about Barbara, and what she would have wanted me to do with the time I had left, which was clearly more time than my daughter had budgeted for. The next morning, I called Denise, and I said 4 words that felt like flipping a switch after weeks of pretending to be asleep. Build the whole file. Over the following 10 days, Denise and I assembled what she called, only half joking, a curriculum of evidence. The lab report on the tea, with full chain of custody. The recorded midnight conversations, 3 of them now, each one worse than the last, including one where Gregory openly discussed a doctor, Voss, whose license, it turned out, had been suspended for 18 months in a different state for signing fraudulent disability paperwork, and who was now quietly practicing under a technicality in Oklahoma while he appealed. The forged early draft of a capacity evaluation Melissa had apparently commissioned before I'd ever set foot in that doctor's office, dated 2 weeks before any appointment existed. Bank records showing Gregory had already contacted 2 different mortgage lenders back in Denver, using projected inheritance from my estate as collateral for a loan application, months before I was even scheduled to have that incapacity declared. Denise also found something I hadn't expected, a text exchange, recovered from Gregory's old work laptop that he'd left, unwiped, in my garage, in which Melissa discussed with her husband, in painstaking financial detail, exactly how much sooner they'd receive money if the natural causes route succeeded versus the guardianship route, and how much of a discount they were willing to accept in exchange for speed. She had run the numbers. My daughter had run the numbers on how much less she was willing to accept for killing me faster. I want to tell you that reading that didn't break something in me, but it did. There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't have a name, the pain of discovering that someone who once fell asleep on your chest as a child has grown into someone who priced your death against a spreadsheet. I sat with that pain for exactly one night, the way I'd sit with any difficult file, and then I closed it, filed it, and got back to work, because the alternative was letting them win by watching me fall apart before the evidence ever reached a courtroom. Fake doctor. Voss called 2 days later to schedule what he called a routine wellness check, and I agreed pleasantly, because Denise had already confirmed the suspended license and alerted the state medical board, who asked us, quietly, to let the appointment happen so they could document it themselves. I sat in that office, performed mild confusion exactly as instructed, answered questions designed to make any answer sound impaired, and let a hidden recorder capture a man with no valid license anywhere in Oklahoma, preparing to sign paperwork declaring me incompetent. 2 state investigators were waiting in the parking lot when I walked out. The guardianship petition Melissa filed a week later filed under the assumption that Dr. Voss's signed evaluation was already locked in, unaware it had triggered a licensing board investigation, instead became, in Miriam's words, though her name here was actually my attorney, a woman named Rosalind Chen, the single worst legal decision your daughter will ever make, because now there's a court record proving intent. Judge Whitfield, reviewing the emergency petition, ordered an independent evaluation instead, conducted by an actual licensed geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Elaine Boateng, who spent 90 minutes with me and concluded, in writing, that I possessed full cognitive capacity, sharp executive function, and no indication of the memory impairment alleged in the petition. That report landed on Judge Whitfield's desk the same week Rosalind filed the criminal complaint attempted murder by poisoning, elder financial abuse, forgery, conspiracy, fraud against a state medical board, 19 separate documented instances, each one dated, sourced, and cross-referenced, the way I used to cross-reference a fraudulent claim before sending it to prosecution. I stood in the clerk's office and watched the paperwork move from desk to desk the way I once watched fraud cases move through a system I'd trusted my whole career, and for the first time since that hospital bed, I let myself believe it might actually work. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning. I wasn't home. Rosalind had advised me to be at her office reviewing documents when it happened, so there would be no scene, no confrontation, no chance for anyone to say later that I had orchestrated some cruel theatrical reveal. I simply got a phone call telling me it was done. Melissa called me 40 minutes later from a number I didn't recognize, her voice shaking in a way I hadn't heard since she was 9 years old and broke her arm falling off a bicycle. "Dad, there's been some kind of terrible mistake, they're saying." "I know what they're saying, Melissa," I told her, "and I want you to understand that my voice was steady, because 35 years of interviewing claimants had taught me that the steadiest voice in the room is always the one that gets believed. Because I have the recording of you and Gregory in my kitchen. I have the lab report on the tea. I have the bank records. I have Dr. Voss's suspended license and his signed statement to the medical board. I built the file the way you two apparently forgot. I know how to build files. This isn't a mistake. This is an audit." She didn't have anything to say to that. I hung up, and I sat in Rosalind's office, and I didn't cry that time. I just sat there, hollowed out and steady at the same time. The way you feel after finally setting down something heavy you've been carrying so long you forgot it had weight. The trial itself took 11 days, and I'll tell you honestly, I don't remember all of it in order, because grief and vindication braided together in a way that made the days blur. I remember the prosecutor playing Carol Jimenez's specimen cup lab report for the jury, and I remember Gregory's face when the toxicologist explained exactly what that combination of medications would have done to a 68-year-old heart already weakened by one stroke. I remember Carol herself on the stand, describing 19 years of nursing and one moment of silence about her own father that she had promised herself she would never repeat. I remember the recording of the kitchen conversation playing through the courtroom speakers, my daughter's voice, flat and clinical, discussing a discount for speed, and I remember watching 2 jurors' faces change permanently in that instant. the way faces do when they hear something they can never unhear. I remember taking the stand myself, and the prosecutor asking me when I first suspected something was wrong, and I answered the way I'd answer any deposition plainly, without embellishment. When my daughter started asking about my will before she asked how I was feeling. In my old profession, we called that an inconsistent claim. You investigate inconsistent claims. You don't ignore them because the person filing them shares your last name. The jury deliberated for just under 5 hours. Guilty on the attempted murder charge. Guilty on conspiracy. Guilty on forgery. Guilty on elder financial abuse. Guilty on every single count the prosecution brought. 14 in total, once several of the original 19 were consolidated for trial. Gregory received 18 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole only after 12, given the toxicology evidence tied directly to his purchase of the sedative through a family member's old prescription he'd falsified refill paperwork to obtain. Melissa received 22 years. A sentence, the judge explained, reading from prepared remarks, was longer specifically because a daughter who calculates the financial value of her father's expedited death while he is recovering in a hospital bed represents a betrayal. This court will not treat as a lesser offense simply because it occurred within a family. I didn't smile when the verdicts were read. I want you to know that because it matters to me that you understand this wasn't triumph. I felt what I can only describe as the specific stillness that comes after a long, correct calculation finally resolves to zero. Not joy. Completion. Carol Jimenez and I still talk, once a month or so, over coffee at a diner near the hospital where all of this started. I made sure, through my real will, the one locked in that safe deposit box the entire time, that a portion of my estate now funds a small annual award in her name at the nursing school she graduated from decades ago, recognizing nurses who report suspected elder abuse, even when it costs them professionally. She cried when I told her. I did too. It's the only crying I've done since the trial that didn't hurt. I still live in that house in Tulsa, alone now, though it doesn't feel as empty as I expected it to. My real will still leaves the bulk of my estate to that scholarship fund for first-generation students in accounting and finance, the field that taught me, more than anything else in my life, how to read what people don't want you to see. I kept one photograph out of everything I put away Melissa at 6 years old, missing her front teeth, holding a plastic insurance claim clipboard I'd given her as a joke, telling me proudly that she was going to grow up and catch bad guys just like her daddy. I don't know what happened between that little girl and the woman who calculated a discount for my faster death. I've stopped trying to solve that particular equation. Some files never close cleanly, no matter how good an investigator you are. Here's what I want to leave you with, because I've thought about very little else for the 2 years since that hospital bed. We tell ourselves that being loved and being safe are the same thing. And for most people, thank God, that's true enough that the lie never gets tested. But it is a lie, structurally, the same way an unverified insurance claim is a lie until somebody checks it. Love is a claim your family files on your trust every single day, and most of the time, it's an honest one. But an honest claim is still worth verifying, especially the closer you get to the years when people start doing math about what you're worth more dead than alive. So here is my assignment for you. The same kind I used to hand a nervous new investigator on their first week. This week, call whoever holds your will, your power of attorney, your beneficiary designations, and ask them, out loud, to read back exactly what's on file. Ask when it was last changed. If you don't remember approving a change, that's not paranoia. That's an inconsistent claim, and inconsistent claims get investigated, not excused. And then sit with the harder question, the one I still turn over some nights on my back porch with a cup of tea I now, understandably, make myself. Of the people who call you dad, or mom, or grandpa, who among them could tell a stranger the exact dollar figure of your life insurance policy faster than they could tell that stranger what actually makes you happy anymore? Sit with that. I did. It took me 68 years and one whispered warning in a hospital room to finally ask it. Now it's your turn, friend. And I mean that word friend, because after everything I've shared with you tonight, that's what you are to me. Type a 1 in the comments if you believe I was right to gather evidence quietly for weeks instead of confronting them the moment I heard that midnight conversation. Type a 2 if you think I should have called the police that same night, before either of them had the chance to try again. Type a 3 if you believe some betrayals are too deep for any sentence, no matter how long, to actually settle the account. I still don't fully know which number I'd pick myself some nights, and I've lived it. Tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. I read every single one of those, and it steadies me more than you'd probably guess. And if a stranger ever protected you when the people who were supposed to were the actual danger, or if you've ever caught that one unguarded flash of the wrong feeling on a face you loved, I want to hear it. Somebody watching tonight is sitting across a table right now from someone who's supposed to love them, doing quiet math they don't want to admit they're doing. Tell them they're not imagining it. Tell them to pull the file. If tonight's story meant something to you, stay a while longer, subscribe, and let me tell you the next one. I've got a whole career's worth of files still to open, and this strange, quiet corner of the internet only exists because people like you keep coming back to hear them. Thank you, truly, for sitting with an old claims investigator tonight. I'll see you in the next file.